AI sucks. And we all know that. But today, I wanted to test AI's Minecraft builds versus mine. So I'll be AI generating an idea and then having AI show me what it looks like. Then I'll build it and we'll compare. So first off, we have the Desert Raiders outpost. So the prompt says that it will be in the desert and it will be a bandit's hideout. So let's get started. So here I'm cleaning up this area and I have the prompt image and looking rough. So I've got the outline of the build here now, and as you can see, I've got this central tower with smaller towers and a protective wall. I was thinking the wall would be something like this tall, around 5 or 6 blocks. And if we go over here and do the smaller towers, I was thinking something like this. And since those are at that height, naturally, the middle tower would be the largest. Now we've got the heights planned, let's get on to actually building. So first here, I was going to start on the wall, but I decided to go ahead and build up all 4 of the smaller towers. Then I went through and did the exteriors of each tower, making sure all of the exteriors matched. Now, we gotta make the interiors of the towers, which will be the same for all 4. On the first floor, I made some wall tables and a lantern. On the second floor, I put some tables and storage and was having a hard time deciding how to arrange it. The third floor, I had more of an idea of how I wanted it to be, so I put down some storage and lanterns to light it up. And really, all the floors have this sort of table and storage with chests and barrels design. I really didn't know what else to do for it, and because of the size, I couldn't make it that intricate. Lastly, I just placed a barrel on top and moved on. Alrighty, we have the interior of the smaller towers all done, and it's time to move on to the main tower. I started by making the pillars around the corners of the building. I then forgot my process for this video and already did the bottom floor. I moved on and built windows up each of the sides of this building. I went through and added spruce wood accents and little details to make it pop out more from the main walls. It's time to make the interior to the main tower. While I do that, I'll explain the lore behind this build. In this build resides a type of illager called the deserter. Deserters are similar to pillagers, but are way more violent. They were pillagers that traveled into the desert to invade sand-swept villages. They carved out pieces of sandstone and built them into the outposts they have today, which you can see that I'm building. After multiple groups were established, they started a trading ring between desert and regular outposts. They keep iron golems and allays captured and grow cacti. They became some of the most feared illagers due to their ruthlessness. So the interior is now complete, and we can finish the main part of the exterior. So I built up the walls all around the base, making this sort of segmented design. Then I tried to build a piston door, but just gave up. However, I liked the bigger tower in the middle. I went through and added details around, that way the walls wouldn't look quite so bland. So now it's time we add some details around the inside of the outpost, that way it isn't so flat and boring. So the first things I did were add these spruce awnings and go around making some sandstone paths around the base. I made details from spruce since it adds such a contrast to the sandstone. Then I put a cart in the front here and planted some cacti. I moved over to the side and built a larger cart and a small spot with chests and barrels. I went to the back and built another storage spot and built a small selling stand beside it. Finally, I moved to the side and built 2 prison cells. Now we are almost done, and all I really had thought of left to do was put some details on the outside. What I was thinking was to do older looking towers on the outside here. I got this idea because I was looking through reference photos of old desert-based military bases and found these sort of tower ruins. What I basically did was build the towers and then go through and destroy part of them. I terraformed quite a bit just so the ground was less flat. Then I built smaller and simpler ruins in this area and was pretty much done. And now it is done. I am extremely pleased with how this turned out, and I'm sure you can agree it is much better than its AI counterpart. I'll put a side-by-side comparison image of my build versus the AI on screen so you guys can see it, and comment down below which one you think is better. Let's keep this up and keep proving how bad AI is. And let's move on to the next one. So I've got the prompt for our next build here, the Obsidian Observatory, a magical and scientific structure that is on mountain peaks. The image this prompt generated barely even looks like Minecraft, and even then, it still looks absolutely terrible. But it's what we have to work with, so let's get started. So I started this by flattening the top of this mountain I chose, and then I got the parts of the build outlined with obsidian. I got started on the main build, or the observatory. I built up this cylinder of black concrete and put designs of obsidian, like a frame, all around it. I made this top bit have rings of blackstone for a variation in the design, and gave it windows. All I had left to do was add some crying obsidian for detail. So now I'm kind of stuck here. I know the next step I want to take, but after that, I don't really know. But that's okay. Let's just go with it and see what happens. I started with a blackstone ring that goes around the center of the bottom. After that, I went through and put end rods and windows. I moved inside to make the floors going up. At the top, I made a dome and split it open, building the telescope, which was a bit hard. I added the doors and some details around the dome and was done with the exterior. Now, we'll do the interior. And while you see me doing this, I'll explain the lore behind this build. There once was a kingdom that was endowed with magic that was based in the stars. This kingdom is known as Lumistica. Its people had the ability to create stars that heal, or use the energy of supernovae as combat magic. Naturally, this kingdom studied the stars and the skies extensively. There was one station where the ruler of this kingdom went though, the Obsidian Observatory. A beautiful and heavily fortified astronomical observatory where the ruler would come and record their own findings about the stars. It was extremely important to these people, so this observatory was heavily guarded by both soldiers and mages. Well, we're done with the interior of the main tower now, so let's move on to the other towers. The first towers I'll do are the study towers. They have similar exterior design to the first tower, as you'll see. I gave it similar obsidian and blackstone accents. After that, I went through and made the interior of the first tower. The interiors of these towers have libraries as their main interior detail, as you could probably see. I moved over to the second tower and I changed up the design, giving it more white accents. The rest of the design is much of the same on both the exterior and interior, with also being mainly library and study based. The first of the towers are done. There are 5 in total, 2 of them are study towers, and 3 of them are guard towers. The 2 I did are study towers, and I went ahead and did the interiors of them since it's similar to the main tower. Now, we'll do the guard towers. The guard towers I made are more box-shaped and based the design more on castles. I gave them little outlets on the sides and made sure to have windows going up them all. I also had to make sure to incorporate obsidian and blackstone designs on and in the walls to make sure to have the continuity with other build designs. I built the second and third towers much the same. The only difference being that the third tower has a basement and a bridge. So now, we're going to do the tower interior. And I'll only do one because that'll give you the general idea for the rest. And while I'm doing this, I want to talk a little on AI, considering I did use it for this video. I do not like AI. Not at all. Using it for this video was very, very difficult. And looking back, it's just a waste of time. But this video is showing that even with bad ideas, putting the time in to do them yourself is better than AI generating them. Whether it be creating ideas or building them. All of the prompts and images for the builds in this video are shit. I don't condone the use of AI, and I don't think any of you should. I don't like generative AI. I will not use it again after this video either. I thought it important to tell all of you that I dislike AI, and have only used it for this once for this video to prove my point. The towers are all done, and there's only one more thing to do before the build is really complete. So let's go. I made paths throughout the place with cobblestone, as I felt that would be the most fitting. I made sure every part of the build was connected properly too. I added little details like carts and barrels around. I imagine these would be carrying things like books and papers, maybe food and drink or some other resources. For the final touches, I added a forest around, that way the mountain wasn't so bare. The Obsidian Observatory is now complete, so let's compare mine to AI. We all know who won this one, I think, but let's not waste any time and get on to the next build. And the next prompt says, a floating wizard tower, a mystical floating tower above the ground. We can definitely work with this. The image though, that is another story altogether. Let's just get started and pretend like we never saw whatever that was. So I made the general outline here, and I've decided that instead of having one solitary tower, I'll have 3. And I want this to be sort of like a wizard school instead of like a solitary wizard tower. But we'll talk more about that later. So here, as you can see, I've built up the towers into cylinders, which will add detail later. On top, I'd put these pointy roofs that you'd expect on a wizard tower. Cliche, I know. But it's the best look for a tower like this, so I used it. I moved to the bottom where I made these sort of platformish designs. Coming out of the bottom is this magenta fire looking stuff, which is magic. I used light blocks to make it glow. Looking at it now, it looks like thrusters, which just goes to show how much more used to sci-fi building I am. Then I moved up to the main tower and started on these bits jutting out. I kept the similar block palette for the roof, but the walls I made calcite to contrast the stone bricks. I put windows all around, which I decided it would be more fitting for there to be fence windows instead of glass. I went to the inside and built the floors for the main tower interior. I went outside and added these window and ring designs made of wood types that contrast the stone bricks. And I just wanted to make sure everything still had this magical feel. For this, I wanted to keep the feel of the main tower, but scaled down. So I made it have a bunch of windows, as you can see. I did the bridges between the towers, which I didn't think needed an intricate design, and started on the first tower. Oak design, and straight windows, the fence design. So I'm honestly so happy with how this has turned out so far. The rings, the window designs, it all pulls itself together really well. And now, we'll do the interior. Igneous Sanctum is a school of magic, where pupils can come and hone their magical skills under the head wizard. It is in the kingdom Ignistrius, home of fire magic. Despite being small, Igneous Sanctum is extremely prestigious, and is where royals of this kingdom can even come and learn their magic. The Headmaster is one of the most powerful wizards in all of Ignistrius, with fire magic capable of taking on armies. The giant rune stones that float around, which I will build soon, offer a shield of protection for the school against any surprise attacks that may arise from a warring kingdom. The rune stones are very old and were carved at the inception of the school, before it was even floating. Hey guys, Editing Stern here. I don't know what happened, but I literally just forgot to record building the interior of the other towers and the top floor of the main tower for some reason. You'll see them in the cinematic, I'm sure, but back to the video. I started by building these small floating islands with rocks with runes on them. I copied and pasted these little floating islands around the whole place here in the sky and around the towers. After that, I made this ring with yellow wool to get the ring of giant rune rocks to actually be, well, a ring. I made outlines and destroyed the ring. I began building the first rune rock. It was a bit confused at first since I was doing this strictly by hand, but I managed to get this nice organic shape. I used worldedit to apply the mixed stone blocks, and I made the rune look glowing and inset, and I made the lines on the sides. This next one was particularly challenging because of the position and shape of the rock and the rune design, but I found something that worked. The next one, I realize now, has this sort of shield shape in the rock, and the rune has a really cool design. And I honestly think this one is my favorite. The last one was another diagonal one, which was particularly difficult, but I eventually got it to work. I copied and flipped the rune designs since it's just easier to reuse the ones that I already made. Here we are. The floating wizard tower is complete, and definitely is the best one so far. Honestly, I really love how this build turned out, especially with the runes floating around it. So, let's now take a look back at that AI image and compare. And the AI is just as awful as I remember. You guys can argue it in the comments, but I'm saying mine won again. Now, enough yapping from me. Let's move on. Here we are, and I've got the new prompt, Astral Archive Tower. It doesn't give me a description, but it says the theme should be arcane and celestial. And I don't know what is up with this and not generating images of Minecraft, but oh well. It looks terrible, and we can easily do better than this. So we have the spot here, and I cleared it up a bit and started on the base of the tower. I figured that a circular design is what would make the most sense here. I built up the tower and started on the top floor, which I made come out a bit and built it up. And I put a glass dome on the top. What we're gonna do next is get the outside detailed and then get the interior done. Let's do it. On the exterior, I started with these V-slants on the walls. I made insets and put smooth stone at the base. These fence corners are just to sort of give contrast and a bit of depth. I moved up top and made hanging bits and these loops on the dome. I moved down and put designs on the wall of the tower part and a stairway going up. I added more designs and pale oak bits to help with depth and contrast. We're gonna do the interior now, and I'll tell you about the lore. The Astral Archive is a magical archive ran and protected by special mages called the Timekeepers. In this place, time magic is used. In the tower are rooms like the library, the time machine, the plant sanctuary, and the skeleton room. The library holds thousands of books that contain history, stories, spell books, I mean anything important really. The time machine is a room with a portal opened by time magic, which requires an immense amount of power, needing giant crystals and beams of magic, which I'll build soon, to allow them to time travel beyond just like a few minutes in the past or future. They use this time machine to make sure historical records are accurate and to get possible lost knowledge. They also use it to get extinct life, like extinct plants in the plant sanctuary or the skeletons, not fossils, of extinct creatures. There's also a magic studying room to study time magic in. I started on the beam of magic on top of the tower by building each color up and replacing some with dirt. Then replacing the dirt with air, then adding sea lanterns. Since the bottom part was more complicated, I got the shape figured out with wool first, then used worldedit to make it have a layered and splotchy design like the beam. So I had a really great idea and I think you guys will like it as well. Let's put it on a floating island. I began by lifting up a chunk in the air and getting it shaped out. Then I extended down the bottom and used Axiom and worldedit to get it shaped out, which I had to work for quite a while on, to be honest. I replaced a big portion of the bottom with stone. Then I made a copy and turned it into yellow wool so it would be easier to replace once I put it in the ground, so I have the correctly shaped hole. I also terraformed to help it some. I then began on the final part of the build, the crystals. I made this foggy spot to put this orb of magic on, which I made similarly to the bottom of the beam up top. I copied and pasted part of the top beam down here, so it just looks like it's going through and holding the island up with magic. Up top, I started on the crystals that float around, still using the wool method. All I had to do was copy and paste them around and then make small beams that would shoot through them, which I had trouble at first, but eventually got. I love how this turned out. It honestly looks so much better than I thought I'd be able to do, but I had such a good idea with it. So many good ideas. Now, let's compare. Mine is, of course, beating the AI's ass. But we've got one more, so let's see what stinker the AI can cook up next. We are at the location for the final build and have the prompt. The Sunken Grove Sanctuary, a mystical underground biome hybrid structure hidden beneath a forest or jungle. It feels like half natural, half ancient. It sounds alright, but the image doesn't speak much to it really. But let's get on it. I started with this giant box of yellow wool and began terraforming the inside. This took quite a bit of time as I was very specific with the design and how the cave looked in the different areas, as I had sketched the build out and had certain areas in mind already. So basically, I'm going to build this cave above ground, and then once everything is done, I'll put it underground. It's made of yellow wool, so I can go through and paint it with stone later on. I continued work on terraforming by making a divot for a lake, which will be really cool. I made a hole in the cave for an entrance and for light. This next part we're going to build a giant tree, which I haven't really done before. I've chosen a real life tree for this, called the Dragon's Blood tree. This tree has a very unique design and a dark red sap, which I'll integrate into the build. I started the tree by making this sort of twisted design, which I had problems getting to work. However, I eventually got it, then copied it and intertwined it, creating this more natural intertwining design. I made a huge canopy for the tree, and you may be wondering why everything is made of wool. It's so I can go through and test different designs before I finalize everything. I made the complicated branches underneath that hold up the leaves before I moved over and tested some bark designs, before I found one I liked. I painted the tree with this design, and I think it worked out really great. I also painted the canopy with leaves. So I just tried to put the tree in the cave, and we have a big problem, guys. The tree is way too big for the cave, so I'm gonna have to go through and make the cave taller. I removed the top part of the cave and placed down the tree. After I did that, I built back up yellow walls and began terraforming on the inside, making sure it all still lines up with what I still had. I went through and smoothed the terrain, remade the hole, and painted the place with stone. Now, we will begin work around the tree in the cave. And I had the idea for the roots to go all along the walls and to make the water in the lake red like the tree sap. I began by cutting out the bottom of the lake and making it all stone. I covered it and layered the red glass to give it this infinite fog effect. Once I did that, I had a really good idea to make it look like the sap is leaking out of the tree to make this lake around it, which looks so good. In the red fog, I put roots coming out, which I made look like it snakes over and extends in and out of the walls. I also added other stone types. Now we move on to the second half of this build, the ancient temples, which I'm really excited for. The first temple I started with a small rectangle shape, and built up stair-esque designs on each end. I added some color, and if you couldn't tell, I'm taking big inspiration from the Mayans. I built a small pool of red back here and a waterfall from the back. On the inside, I made this red pool sort of well thing in the center. I put insets in the floor and shelves with barrels. On the outside, I made everything look aged and ancient. I began the next temple by getting some more area and building it a lot bigger, though with similar design principles. I added some little details here and there and put this spot up top, after which I went through the main part and added the terracotta and pillars so it wasn't all so boring. I made it all look aged and then moved inside, where I built this spot here, and in here I thought of these red spots as sort of like scrying pools. I also built this bridge here for better access. Let's move over by the big tree for the main temple now. This one is supposed to more closely resemble a temple like Chichen Itza in real life. I made sure to have the exterior not have too much detail, but still look good. Now we move inside and I'll explain the lore for this build. The tree here is ancient and imbued with magical powers that seep throughout the lands. The temples and tree have long since been abandoned by its original inhabitants. They were known as the Arcanians, the original wielders of magic. They got their magic by consuming the red sap that leaked from the tree. It gave them gifts, which they then could continue to use the sap as a magical material for other things like enchanting or stuff like that. After learning all that they could from this place, they set out into different parts of the world, traveling, learning, and building. The ones with astral magic made the kingdom Lumistica. Those with fire magic built the Ignistrious kingdom, and those with time magic built the Astral Archive and became timekeepers. This place is the origin point for magic. All of the builds are now done. I'm pretty happy with how the Sunken Grove Sanctuary came out, and all of the builds really. Let's compare to AI now. And it's just as all of the others. I think we've successfully proven that AI just sucks. And even if the ideas you have are bad, just do it yourself. Don't go with AI. But if you did enjoy it, please leave a big fat thumbs up, as it'd be greatly appreciated, and subscribe for more content like this. I am so glad to finally be back, guys. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'm gonna tell you right now, I have so much planned for this year. Have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye!